Hey guys, today we're going to be watching German Soldier Remembers World War II by Memoirs of World War II. Yes, so what this YouTube channel has been doing he's been going around and getting these stories from a bunch of World War II veterans because they are dying. And I feel like this is something that needs to be done. We need to record more of these stories because they are so important. The individual human stories are extremely important to history, especially when it comes to understanding the other point of view and what was going on inside of Germany at this point, which I feel is not talked about enough, and I'm glad a channel like this exists. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it.
The full name is Gert Friedrich Franz Schmitz. And I remember on September the 1st, 1939, Hitler was on the radio telling that the war started. Since 5 o'clock this morning, our troops marching into Poland, doing whatever they do best. 6 months later, Hitler marched into the France. The British came and the Americans came into the war.
Very brief explanation by this man. Yeah, that must have been wild. That must have been crazy to hear, though. Like, such a short time span, you know. You're sitting around listening to the radio. First Hitler's telling you, "Hey, troops are marching into Poland." And then 6 months later, you hear, "We've taken Paris." Especially now, I don't think this man probably was alive during World War I. Because I don't think he'd be alive today had he been, obviously. But the idea, maybe for his parents, they'd be like, yo, we fought 4 years in Belgium and in France, and nothing happened. We just took Paris in 6 months. That must have been just crazy to hear.
And I talked to my grandpa, and he told me, he said, if they want to win the war, it don't look too good. They said, don't say that, Grandpa. We cannot lose the war. That was not even remotely in my mind that we ever could lose a war, you know, because we were so conditioned politically. Hitler controlled the newspapers, they controlled the radio, and Goebbels, the propaganda minister, he controlled everything else. And we listened to the news, and they told us all about going on in the Western Front and how successful they are and all that. And then we walked outside and we heard the guns.
That's crazy to hear. That's really crazy. Yeah. I guess in a sense, the closest example we have for my American viewers, I guess, would probably be the war in Afghanistan or the war in Vietnam. The news essentially telling you, hey, everything's going smooth. Taliban's losing. Realistically, that's not the case. Now, in the grand scheme, if you look at it from a top-down view, like as if you were playing a strategy game, you would see that yes, technically we are winning by that kind of perspective. But the actual truth of the matter is, you look down there, and you're like, shit, not really winning. Not really losing, but we're not winning. Now, this is different than World War II because the truth of the matter was the Allies were winning. Germany was not winning, nowhere close to it at this point in time when he could hear guns coming closer. So it's just like a little kind of short comparison on how things can get manipulated, make people believe certain things.
You say, well, that is too close from what they tell us where they're supposed to be.
From the harsh conditions of a peace defeat in the First World War. Germany was reeling from the harsh conditions of a peace treaty that left the country shamed and buried in economic crisis. But in 1933, when a radical new leader rose to power, promising to restore Germany and place it at the forefront of world powers. The people were captivated. Adolf Hitler's reign brought swift economic relief, and the German military was quickly on the rise. But his radical political party enforced totalitarianism over the government and the public, making Nazism synonymous with the German way of life.
Remember, yeah, Hitler did win a large percentage of the vote, but he was not exactly the majority of what people want. You know, he did not win the majority vote. The way German Parliament worked back then, I believe I've talked about this in a previous video, but Hitler's party, the NSDAP, they had to work with another political party in order to get that majority, so that then Hitler, by tradition, becomes the chancellor. Now, the president at the time, in 1933, or 1932, whatever year it was, he held off. He did not want to give the chancellorship to Hitler because he knew Hitler was not a good guy. But the pressure from those inside the government came too much, and he had to concede and give Hitler the chancellorship. And then, well, 1933, President Hindenburg dies, and Hitler starts taking over. Stuff like that. Very brief explanation of that situation, but I just wanted to add it into the video.
They had everything organized. You couldn't get lost or fall through the cracks. You know, there were no cracks. You were part of it if you liked it or not. I got drafted into the Hitler Youth when I was 10 years old. And they gave us a uniform.
Okay, so was he a child soldier? Or was he 10 years old when the party took control?
You know.
Like thousands of other German boys, Gert Schmitz was swept up in the Hitler Youth. But the draft was not without its benefits. Upon graduation, Gert was offered the opportunity to fly with the Luftwaffe.
They said, do you want to go to a jet pilot training school? We have one in Fulda, Germany. And you go over there and you start training for flying Messerschmitt 262 jets. He says, shoot, yeah.
But before he would reach
Fair. I mean, who wouldn't be excited to learn how to fly a jet? Especially when they were, like, new. Like, I'm terrified of heights, but the prospect of learning how to fly a jet at that time probably would have intrigued me.
the airfield, the Allied bombing campaign would reach it first.
I'm kind of confused a bit as to how
And when I got
old he
up
was.
there, the hangars were bombed, the runways were bombed, the airplanes were bombed. And there was nothing left for us to do. And they said, well, we'll temporarily assign you to a paratrooper outfit and send you to the Western Front. So we got on the train that afternoon. We ended up in Pasewalk. We talked to the local people there. They heard on the news that the Russians had just come from the south, from the east and south, and cut off that air base where we were. And that was bad news.
Dang. Yeah, I doubt this man would be telling us this story had he stayed at that airport, because he would have been captured and most likely killed by the Soviets, because Soviet retribution, Soviet revenge was very, very harsh towards the Germans, as was, obviously somewhat justifiable. Obviously killing prisoners of war I don't think is justifiable, so both the Soviets and the Germans. Obviously, the Germans did it indeed in much larger numbers than the Soviets ever did. But still, you gotta mention that on all sides, atrocities were committed. Just some sides, some people did more than others, but it is still important to discuss atrocities that have occurred. It doesn't diminish anything else, It's just something that has to be discussed. Anyways, had he been captured, he probably would have been killed by the Soviets. Or he would have been sent to the Soviet camps and probably still would have died there because conditions were probably bad, were awful. So
Gert may have escaped capture by the Russians, but now he was headed to the Western Front, where the British and Americans were on the advance, and the German army was in disarray.
That was chaos. The whole German armed forces was in total chaos. We didn't know where they were. I don't know where the headquarters were. You didn't know where the real front was or anything. You know, you're so busy surviving and fighting. We either won here or we lost over there, and then go to the next. We don't know the overall picture. We have no idea what happened. And then we finally marched into Holland. The street was open between the town and the woods where that forest where we were supposed to go into. And it was kind of exposed, you know. And the Allies always flew 8 fighter planes roaming in the sky. They had total sky superiority. And we had to get across that open space, and those guys were flying around there saying, if we go in the column over there, they see us and they're gonna mow us down. So, but if you go one guy every 100 feet, they may not even pay attention to us. So it came my time to go across, and the guy paid attention to me.
Oh.
And he came and started shooting at me, and I went into that deep ditch. And as soon as he went past me, I got out and run down toward the woods, and when I came the other way, I jumped back in the ditch. And finally got wise. Instead of going across, he came down alongside the ditch and just unloaded. Bullets flying behind me and in front of me. I mean, there was bullets flying every way. So he got up and I ran, and I didn't go back in the ditch. I went all the way into the woods.
How do you... That man has some incredible luck. First, he gets sent to an airport, and then that airport got bombed, so he gets sent to the Western Front. And then literally as he arrives in that new village, he gets told that where he was had just been captured by the Soviets, and now here he is on the Western Front running towards the woods, and he's getting shot at by a plane, and miraculously doesn't get hit. Lucky.
Yeah,
lucky.
that was kind of nasty. But I hate Mustangs to this day.
Yeah, that's understandable. That is understandable.
We were in Ramsdorf. That was my buddy and I. We were up at one end of town, and we had a bazooka. The tank came down the street, and they started shooting. And we run behind those big logs there, you know, and they couldn't hit us there. He pulled that trigger, and when he hit, it said, woof. He got that warhead right between the tracks in the body. And he just blew the hell out of the inside, and nothing moved anymore after that. There was another tank that was up the street, and we standing in there kind of looking down the street, see what we could do. And he said, I'm gonna go on the other side of the street, because it was curved a little bit, he could see better. He said, don't go over there, that tank is up there. And while I was in the middle in the street, that tank shot one round right between his legs. I went over there and got him. The shrapnel went into his uniform and ripped his chest open.
Oh.
And he was sitting with his butt in the street, and he said, and then he collapsed. When we marched into Ramsdorf first earlier, the company commanders told us, they say, you go point to make sure everything is all right. Way later on, after we were supposed to move out, they said, man, we probably want to point again, you know, if we the first one out there. And the company commander said, you're the rear guard. So they said, no, you don't want to be on the rear on the way out, you want to be front. But anyway, there was an open field, and they wanted to march into the woods. And what we were way behind as a rear guard, they walked into a trap. The Americans, they already were on 3 sides, and they waited till the whole battalion marched in there, and they mowed them down. So the 4 of us, we went off to the right into the woods and disappeared in the woods. And that's how we ended up behind enemy lines.
Gert and his 3 comrades were on their own. disoriented, and desperately searching for ever-elusive friendly territory.
And then when we finally got into Dillman, it was daylight, and there was a 6-foot fence, a chain link fence. They said, well, that must be a park. Nobody is fighting in the park, so we're gonna be pretty safe. So we got over and climbed over that 6-foot fence. GIs walking all over the place there. And they saw us and they started shooting at us. They had a 2.5 truck with machine guns on there. They came around and started shooting at us with that. And then we said, we got to get out of this park. So we jumped over the fence. Then there was tanks on the outside. They said, that ain't not safe either. Let's jump back in the fence. We jumped back over that 6-foot fence. And then that truck came and started shooting at us. We went back over the fence again and went in the other direction. And we saw a pine forest over there. And they said, let's get into that forest and get the heck out of here. And we crawled on our stomach, and we finally got into the woods, and they came after us. And they said, well, let's hide behind the trees till they go. And if they don't see us, they might go away. And they came, and I stood behind that tree. You know, we all stood behind each one of those trees. It was just big enough to hide us. And they said, what I'm gonna do, you know, so we can't run, they're gonna start shooting at us. And I finally, I put my hand out and waved, you know, say, hi. And they said, come on out, you know, hands up, hands up. And that's how we got captured.
His American was actually pretty good.
Now in American custody, intended for relocation to a POW camp in the United States, Gert began the long journey across Europe. From prison camp to prison camp, he passed the time by drawing pictures to document his experiences. But before Gert would reach the French coast, Germany surrendered, the war came to an end, and the prisoners were sent back to their homes. The Germany Gert returned to was very different than he remembered. Hitler was gone, the Nazi Party dissolved, and Gert himself had acquired a fresh perspective.
I didn't realize how bad it was, but then after the war, everything came democratic, you know, and peaceful. And I said, wait a minute, that's a hell of a lot different than what we went through, all that, you know. I didn't know about the full extent of the concentration camp because that was kept so well secret, you know, that we heard about it, you know, but they said that's where murderers go in and wife beaters, you know, and they supposed to be rehabilitated. But they didn't.
Really did not, haven't heard that perspective before. That's interesting. I wonder if, is that like the wider tale that the Germans would use to lie about it? Because that'd be a fair, that would be a good lie. That would be a good lie because it also, yeah, murderers, wife beaters, you know. You hear that and you kind of aren't really going to question it. Especially if you don't go and visit, you know, you're not going to go to visit because only the SS maintain those camps.
Do that. And I didn't know the full extent till I came to the United States.
Wow, you still didn't know it until you came here. Dang.
Following the war, Gert immigrated to the U.S., served with the Army, and went on to a career in aerospace engineering, working alongside Werner von Braun. Gert served his country honorably in the Second World War, but like all of those who survived, regardless of what side, he hopes to one day live in a world free of violent conflict.
War is the stupidest thing that man invented. If you can't talk it out, if you cannot communicate, you start fighting. You have to do away with your problem. You have to annihilate your problem. But that is not a solution. Yeah, that just create more problems. Don't fight, talk it out. There got to be a solution. There is always a solution.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh from Memoirs.
All right, yeah. Oh, that video is so good. Definitely subscribe to Memoirs of World War II. Great channel. I love the content that he provides. I guess somewhat documentaries that he gives. Very insightful. It is something that is definitely needed. And yeah, that's where I'm gonna end it today. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, remember to leave a like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.